Welcome, you deep dive enthusiasts. Today we're embarking on a pretty fascinating journey into the complex world of Formula One. We're specifically unpacking a recent mystery that left quite a few people scratching their heads. You're tuned in to the deep dive, and right here on the F1 Blog's YouTube channel, we're about to explore one of the most intriguing stories in recent F1. We are talking about Aston Martin's absolutely head-spinning performance swing between the Spa-Francorchamps and the Hungarian Grand Prix. I mean, think about it. One weekend, they looked like they had one of the most challenged cars on the grid at Spa, really struggling. And then, the very next race weekend, Fernando Alonso is clinching a fantastic fifth place in Hungary. It's not a normal turn of events, is it? Especially when you consider how incredibly different those two circuits actually are. So how on earth did a team go from what seemed like, total despair to genuine euphoria in just 1 week? That's our mission for this deep dive, to pull back the curtain on that incredible transformation.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating here, to understand that Aston Martin shift, that sort of depression total to euphoria, as some put it, you first absolutely have to get your head around the radical differences between Spa and Hungary. They are virtually polar opposites. They do completely different things from an F1 car. It's almost like two different sports sometimes.
Okay, so lay it out for us. Spa first. What's the deal there?
Right, Spa-Francorchamps. It's legendary, obviously. A circuit of immense speed. It's a true power track. Outright top speed and aerodynamic efficiency, they're absolutely critical. If your car has an inherent problem with drag, basically the air holding it back, you're just going to be, well, dead on those long straights. We saw this perfectly with teams like Red Bull, didn't we? Verstappen, for instance, could run minimal rear wing, loads less downforce. That gave him incredible straight line speed, and that strategic choice, that let them pull miles ahead of competitors like McLaren, especially down the Kemmel Straight. Every single time you accelerate through those long zones at Spa, if you're carrying too much drag, you're just bleeding lap time. It's unforgiving for a car that isn't slippery.
Okay, so Spa equals speed, low drag needed. What about Hungary then? The opposite, you said.
Completely. Hungary is often called Monaco without walls, or sometimes a rat trap circuit. It's much slower, much twistier, top speed, far less important there. Instead, lap time is gained mainly in the really curvy Sector 2, which is packed with slow to medium speed corners. So the focus shifts entirely. It goes from straight line speed to mechanical grip, how well the tires literally stick to the road, and also what we call transient response. That's basically how quickly the car reacts to changes in direction, like through chicanes.
Right, gotcha. So you can already see how a car might perform really differently just based on the track layout alone. But like we said, that doesn't explain the whole Aston Martin story, is it? From the back to P5. That's huge.
Exactly. That can explain some variance, sure, but not that radical swing. It feels like just scratching the surface. Which brings up the important question. Why did Aston Martin specifically suffer so much at Spa and then suddenly thrive in Hungary? We need to connect this to the bigger picture, what the team was actually doing and the context of those race weekends.
Okay, so what was the bigger picture for Aston Martin around that time?
Well, first, the team had actually brought quite a few new upgrades, novedades, as I might say, to the races before Spa. But here's the absolute crucial detail. Spa was a sprint weekend.
Ah, the sprint format. Less practice time.
Exactly. And what does that mean practically? Instead of the usual 3 free practice sessions to test, evaluate, refine new parts, you get one, just FP1. 1 hour. That is simply not enough time, particularly for complex aerodynamic changes, to properly understand and optimize them. The drivers can't give consistent feedback comparing different setups. The engineers can't gather enough data to see how the upgrades are really working with the rest of the car. So Aston Martin were basically caught. They were uncertain if these new parts were helping, hindering, or if they should just take them off again. That single session left them, frankly, with more questions than answers.
Okay, so untested upgrades due to the sprint weekend. That's one factor. What else?
Second, and this is quite well known, the Aston Martin car has a kind of generalized inherent problem with aerodynamic drag. It's not a new thing. It's sort of baked into its fundamental design this season. And even what sounds like a small deficit, maybe being 7 kilometers per hour down on top speed compared to the leaders, that could be absolutely fatal in F1, especially on a high-speed track like Spa. So this weakness was just brutally exposed and amplified by Spa's long straights. It made it incredibly difficult for them, like trying to run a marathon with a parachute on, basically.
Right, parachute on at Spa, not ideal.
Not ideal at all. And then here's where it gets really interesting, a piece of the puzzle that often gets overlooked. Aston Martin, like actually a few other teams, even Red Bull, surprisingly had strategically set up their car at Spa thinking it would be a wet race.
Oh, they gambled on the weather.
They did. They anticipated rain, optimized the setup for wet conditions, which often means, more downforce, different brake balance, things like that. But then, as Fernando Alonso himself sort of lamented after the race, the FIA or the conditions effectively took away the wet race from them. Maybe by delaying the start or not running when it was properly wet, the conditions just didn't play into their hands. So this high-stakes weather gamble, combined with the drag issue and the untested upgrades from the sprint format, it just turned Spa into an absolute disaster for them. A perfect storm, really.
Wow, okay. So ill-suited track, sprint weekend messing with upgrades, the drag issue, and a failed weather bet. Yeah, that sounds like a recipe for a terrible weekend. It really starts to make sense why they struggled so badly there. But that just makes the Hungary turnaround even more mysterious, doesn't it? What possibly changed so dramatically in just 7 days?
Well, the big difference in Hungary was track time. They finally had the full 3 free practice sessions. That was crucial. It allowed them to properly test and actually optimize those upgrades that were basically untried at Spa. Suddenly, these enhancements that hadn't performed, or frankly couldn't even be evaluated properly before, started working as intended. They could run back-to-back comparisons, different configurations, get proper driver feedback, analyze the data systematically. And the car, as they said, took a real step forward in overall performance. Particularly, crucially, in the slow and medium speed corners that absolutely define the Hungaroring. Now, the main deficit is still primarily top speed because that underlying drag issue is still there. You can't fix that overnight.
Right, that's fundamental to the car design.
Exactly. But it wasn't crippling them in the corners anymore or affecting the general handling like it seemed to before. So that meticulous optimization of their existing components, finally given the proper track time to do it, that made all the difference in Hungary.
It almost sounds like they're, I don't know, assembling a kind of Frankenstein car, mixing and matching parts. How can teams still be doing these sorts of experiments, making such big changes so late in a regulation cycle? We're pretty deep into these rules now. You'd think things would be more locked down.
That's a brilliant question, and really highlights something important about how F1 teams operate, especially now with the budget caps in place. They aren't necessarily designing brand new ground-up components constantly at this stage. Instead, they're often utilizing what you could call an inventory of parts, or a fondo de armario, basically a wardrobe of already designed and made bits. Think of it like having several different floor specifications ready to go, maybe an Imola floor that's good for high-speed stability, or you discard the Silverstone floor, which is maybe for peak downforce and various wings, different cooling options, etc. They don't just invent new parts overnight. They combine these pre-existing elements.
It's on what? Simulator work?
Exactly. Based on extensive simulator data, CFD, computational fluid dynamics, wind tunnel correlation, and critically, what they're observing about the car's actual weaknesses on track during race weekends. So this process isn't always about brand new development in the sense of designing from a blank sheet. It's often more about effective testing, smart deployment, and finding the optimal combination of the components they already have available for each specific circuit's demands. It's less about building a totally new car mid-season and much more about perfecting the existing one using the tools already in their toolbox.
That makes sense. It's about optimization, not just invention.
Precisely. And if you connect that to the bigger picture, it shows why a significant chunk of the engineering team has to stay focused on the current season, even with budget caps pushing resources towards next year's car. They're not just idly building parts. They are constantly refining the current car with what they've got. They're improving their testing methods, getting better at detecting subtle issues from the data. And even if the current Aston Martin, the AMR25 perhaps, isn't going to win the championship, let's be honest, it's probably not the car you'd pick first for your Dream Team collection. Those engineers doing this work are absolutely crucial.
Why crucial if the car isn't fighting at the very front?
Because they're developing the team's underlying capability. The rhythm of work, the problem-solving processes, the speed of analysis, the communication between trackside and factory. They're building faster data analysis pipelines, creating more efficient ways to make setup changes, refining simulation tools. It's not just about the physical car parts, it's about the continuous process of learning, adapting, and using resources efficiently. That builds the fundamental strength of the team for future seasons, for future cars. They are really the unsung heroes of that constant iterative improvement cycle in F1.
What a fascinating dive into, well, the real nuts and bolts of Formula One performance. It's so clear that a team's results aren't just about raw speed or one magic bullet upgrade. It's this really complex interplay, isn't it? Circuit characteristics, those high-pressure strategic calls, the impact of things like sprint weekends, and then all that tireless work from the engineers optimizing behind the scenes, often unseen work.
Indeed. The Aston Martin example just shows us that even results that look simple on the surface, struggling one week, fifth the next, they hide these deep layers of technical and strategic thinking. It's a real testament to the fact that even with mature regulations, and even when a team isn't necessarily fighting right at the sharp end, there's always more to learn, always more to optimize. There are always surprising insights waiting if you dig deep enough. It just reminds you of that relentless, almost obsessive pursuit of perfection and adaptation in F1. Every tiny detail matters. Every race weekend is a brand new puzzle.
And that wraps up another fascinating deep dive here on the F1 Blogs YouTube channel. We really hope you feel a little more well-informed about the inner workings of F1 and how a team can swing so dramatically in just one race weekend. So next time you see a surprising result pop up on the timing screens, remember, it's probably less about magic and much more about meticulous data work, strategic gambles paying off, or not, and maybe even a hidden arsenal of prefabricated parts being deployed just right. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? What overlooked wardrobe items that you have in your own life or work that could maybe unlock a surprising performance jump? Food for thought, perhaps. Anyway, if you enjoyed this exploration and want to keep getting these kinds of insights, make sure you hit that subscribe button for the F1 Blogs YouTube channel. That way you won't miss our next analysis. We really appreciate you joining us for this deep dive.